right. We are talking about parallel lines and transversals. In particular, we're going to be talking about what happens to the angles that are developed when you have two parallel lines and what's called a transversal. This first lesson is going to be a longer note-taking lesson. There's going to be a lot that we have to establish in this. And then basically the rest of today in this unit is applying what we're learning in this lesson a whole bunch of different ways. All right, so just know there's going to be a lot of note-taking. First off, it starts with parallel lines. Parallel lines are two lines that point the same direction and never touch. You should know that by now. That shouldn't be like a new concept. So you're going to draw two parallel lines. What you might not know is that in geometry, we tell you that the lines are parallel by putting arrows on them. So if there's not arrows, you can assume that they're not parallel. If you put those little arrows like that, then it's saying those lines are parallel. Now, let's imagine for a second that we had, now you don't need to draw this part, I'm just going to explain it, so don't draw what I'm about to draw. But let's say I had another pair of parallel lines on the same picture. To show that those are parallel, they would put two arrows on each of those. Again, don't put this on yours because I just want to talk about this one set. I'm just showing you that they'll put the pairs together by showing how many arrows are on them. And then I could have a third set, they would have 3 arrows, a fourth set that have like 4 little arrows grouped together. So that's the first thing, just showing you that there are parallel lines. And then if we have a line that crosses the two parallel lines, like, well, let's draw it like that. That line that crosses them is called the transversal. I think I spelled that wrong. No, maybe not. No, there's a V in there. It's a V, not an F. Oh yeah, I had it up top correctly. That line is called the transversal. Let's think. Break the word down. You guys know what this prefix means? Trans. You're getting there. To go across. Like transport. The Transcontinental Railroad. I'm sure you can think of another example in your head. But trans, right? To go across. So the transversal is called that because it's going across, it's traversing, it's the transversal going across the two parallel lines. What happens with this is they now are going to start using those conditional statements. And so let me kind of explain what happens here. I'm going to start making a conditional statement. Here's my conditional statement. If there are two, oh yeah, I forgot, with parallel, the word parallel, write this up at the top here. The symbol for that is two lines together like this. So I'm going to make two lines together like that as a shortcut. It's okay to put it in your notes. It's okay to put it in your work. It's okay to always put that for parallel. Except if you're making a proof. In a proof, then you're going to write it out because we talked about a proof is a formal thing. So if there are two parallel lines with a transversal, then, and then what we're going to have is 4 different conclusions that are going to come from this hypothesis. 4 different conditional statements. So we're going to say, okay, if there's 2 parallel lines and a transversal, then we know these 4 things. I'm not going to write out that conditional statement all 4 times. I'm just going to say then, and we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? The first then that we're going to have, then corresponding angles. Corresponding is a fancy math dork word for matching. Then corresponding angles are congruent. For each conclusion that we make, remember there's going to be 4 of them, we're going to draw a little mini version of the 2 parallel lines of the transversal, and we're going to highlight what corresponding angles are. Okay? So I'm going to draw a little mini picture of that. So underneath corresponding angles, we're going to draw what corresponding angles look like. 2 parallel lines. It's got the little like thing on it. The transversal. Corresponding means matching like this. The upper left and the upper left. Those 2 angles would both be parallel to each other. Now, the same thing is true for the upper right and the lower left. I'm going to draw them out. I'll let you guys decide if you need to make all of these examples. But look, in that same 2 parallel lines in a transversal, these are also corresponding. 2 parallel lines in the same transversal. These, the lower left, they're also corresponding. So we have all 4 of those sets of angles. 2 parallel lines in a transversal. These ones are also corresponding. So we know for sure that if there's 2 parallel lines and a transversal, that all 4 sets of corresponding angles are congruent in pairs. Now, it's not saying that all 4 are the same, right? It's just saying that, like, if the upper left is 110 degrees, then we know the upper left of the bottom one would also be 110 degrees because they are corresponding angles. If this one was 70 degrees, then we would know that that one's 70 degrees because they are corresponding angles. So that's the first conditional statement we're going to learn. The second one, if there are 2 parallel lines in a transversal, then the second thing is alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are also congruent. Let me show you what I mean by alternate interior angles. Parallel lines, transversal. First off, let's go back to our base case example here, our normal thing. What I want to show you in this, up here, let's label this. The interior is between the 2 parallel lines. That is the interior. The exterior is outside the 2 parallel lines. Now watch, I could draw this a different way and the interior and exterior might move around. Look, watch. I could have my two parallel lines going straight up and down. And the transversal could be here. This would be the interior in here. This out here would be the exterior. And out here would be the exterior. Do you guys see that? It means it's between the two parallel lines. That is the interior, like sandwiched in between the lines. The exterior would be outside those two lines. So we have interior and exterior. All right, now let's go back to this. Alternate interior. Alternate means going back and forth. Alternate interior angles would be this angle, because it's on the inside, and this angle. It's alternating back and forth on the inside. Alternate interior angles. In this same example, we would have these other ones, right? Like this. Let's go like this. 1, 2, 1, 2. Those would be congruent. Actually, if I was going to do these 4 correct, it should have been like the first one would have 1, the second pair would have 2 matching, right? The third pair would have 3 little lines. So if you drew all 4, draw it out like this. This would have like 4 of them. Just showing that they're potentially all different, but just what the pairs are. So now we know alternate interior angles are congruent. The next one. If I'm going too fast at some point, just raise your hand and start yelling at me. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. Two parallel lines, a transversal. These would be the alternate exterior. See how they're going back and forth across the transversal, and they're on the exterior. Two parallel lines, a transversal. Those two, alternate exterior. One more. Same side. So as opposed to alternating back and forth, same side means they're on the same side of the transversal. Same side, interior angles. So angles that are on the same side, that are inside, same side, interior angles are supplementary. They add it together to make 180 degrees. So the picture would be like this. Now for this, we're going to write angle 1 and angle 2 like that. And below it, we would say angle 1 plus angle 2 equals 180 degrees. There's another pair. We could say or. Angles 3 and angles 4. Angle 3 plus angle 4 also would equal 180 degrees. These 4 angle relationships are humongous. We are going to be using them for the rest of this class. So you are going to need to memorize these 4 sets of relationships. We're going to be working with them a bunch, which will help you memorize it. But it's super important that you know corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interior angles are congruent, alternate exterior angles are congruent, and same side interior angles are 180 degrees. Remember last week when we talked about how the problems would give you little clues, right? We talked about like the signs that a relationship is there. Remember the little box and all that stuff? Well, in these problems, if they're telling you that 2 lines are congruent, or excuse me, are parallel, the reason why they're telling you that 2 lines are parallel is because one of these 4 relationships are going to be important for you to solve it out. Now that we know these things, let's get into what the problems might look like. Let's get into some example problems. I haven't even gotten to any example problems. One example could look like this. Here, let's make the parallel lines look different so it's not always looking the same. 2 parallel lines and a transversal. And then make the little parallel signs on there. They could just sit there and say, okay, this angle here is 95 degrees. And then they're going to tell you, well, let's go figure out what the rest of the angles are. Let's figure out what angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's figure out what all the rest of them are. Before we do this, another thing that's going to happen, I want to remind you guys of some old relationships. Things that are also that you're going to need to use in this lesson. You don't need to write this out, but just know that you're also going to use linear pairs and vertical angles. Let's put that on pause for a second. In this one, we should know right away that the given angle has a corresponding relationship with one of the other angles. Can someone tell me the number for the corresponding, the matching relationship? Yeah, Braden? 2 is not corresponding with it. 2 is vertical with it. Aditi, yeah? 3 is not corresponding with the given angle, yes? 6 is not corresponding. Alexis, 7 is corresponding. Corresponding means, look, like upper right and upper right of the 4 angles. So look at those 4 angles and those 4 angles. See how 7 is in the same spot as the 95? You guys got that now? All right. One of them is alternate exterior with the given angle. Which angle is alternate exterior to this one? Right here. Braden, yes, 5 is also alternate exterior. So I know that this one here is 95. Hey, look, if angle 7 is 95, I know what angle 2 is. Can someone say the relationship between 2 and 7? Name the relationship, yes? Those are alternate interior. I know that this is also 95 degrees. There's actually a whole bunch of relationships here. How could we figure out what angle 1 is? Anyone have any idea what angle 1 would be? It's in a relationship with the given angle, yeah? How did you get that it was 85 degrees? Because they're a linear pair, right? This angle and that angle together make 180. So if that's 85, I know this is 85. And now you can go through and do a whole bunch of that same stuff. What about angle 3? Angles 3 and 1 are in a relationship. Name that relationship. What are 1 and 3? They're in a relationship. What's it called? They're vertical angles. Very good. So I know this is 85 degrees. Let's see. Angles 1 and 4 are in a relationship. What's the relationship between angles 1 and 4? Nope. Corresponding. So this one's also 85 degrees. And then angle 6. Let's go angles 1 and 6. Angles 1 and 6 are in a relationship. What's the relationship between angles 1 and 6? It's not just called exterior. You're on the right track, though. Alternate exterior. This is also 85 degrees. That's one type of example problem that it could have. Let's give you some more types. That's the first example problem. Let's try another one. I am going to draw a trapezoid. It's a terrible trapezoid. And in my trapezoid, these two lines are parallel to each other. And we're going to say that this bottom one here is 3x plus 3x plus 1. And this top one is 2x plus 29. Let's try to figure out what is the relationship between those two angles that I just gave you that have all the x's in them. Name the relationship. Now, the first thing you might think of is, well, this is weird. That doesn't look like all of these things we just drew, Mr. Page. Well, what you have to do is use your imagination. Let's imagine, you don't need to draw this, you can just imagine this, that these two lines continued on and that this line continued on. Now, do you guys see the two parallel lines in the transversal? You guys see it now? So what's the relationship between those two angles that I just gave you? Say it again. Now, this is going to be the important part. What do you know about same side interior angles? They have a sum of 180 degrees. So now you can go through and set up an algebra equation. 2x plus 29 plus 3x plus 1 equals 180 degrees. And we're not going to solve it right now. Then you could go through and solve it. See, they could give you a bunch of stuff like this. They could give you algebra equations of things that are corresponding or are alternate interior or alternate exterior. As you guys go through this lesson, I want you to think about these four things. You have to know these. So you'll notice throughout this whole time, the way I'm going to help people is I'm going to ask, and I kind of did it right now. I'll say, what do you know about corresponding angles? Or what do you know about alternate interior angles? And if your answer is, you're going to struggle. But if you go, oh, I know that they're congruent or they're supplementary, that's going to help you out. I'm also, when you ask for help, I'm going to ask you to name the relationship. So I'll say like, oh, hey, I might help you this way. Angles 2 and 5 are in a relationship. What's the name of that relationship? And then you'll say, oh, they're same side interior. Then I'll ask you another question. What do you know about same side interior angles? So now when we do this lesson, we're going to have to apply this stuff a whole bunch of different ways.